Why, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Let me get organized here. Nice to see everybody. Happy Tuesday. Tuning in to you guys live from SF today. It's currently 1 o'clock, so we're just going to get ahead and get started right away. Let me know if there's any audio issues. We'll do a quick sound check while folks are trickling in. Let me know if I'm coming in all right, or if I'm too loud, too soft, or just right. Today's session is going to be a notebook session. Let me organize my camera here a little bit. It's going to be a notebook session. We'll go through, it'll be similar to the one, in case you did tune in last week, where we built a notebook together. We'll teach you guys a little bit more about, the specific use case, how to get started from notebooks from scratch. Again, you can get started using notebooks a whole bunch of different ways, but in this one, we'll just build a notebook from start to finish, and then also show you how you could schedule these and potentially connect it to something like Zapier or some of our other MCP connectors too. Right. We do these webinars every other week, or every week actually, twice a week. We do a notebooks style webinar every other week, and then we do an onboarding webinar every week. So you can tune into those. We have a couple coming up. If you are a Spanish speaker, you can join our Spanish speaking onboarding on Thursday. And then if you're not Spanish speaking, we have one coming up next Tuesday as well. Talk through all the basics about what is Julius, how do you get started, what are some of the tools that you have at your disposal, and things like that. And in case you haven't joined those previously, all of these are visible in our YouTube channel down below. You can see all of the different webinars that we've done in the past, then also any of the upcoming ones we have in the future. And then you can also subscribe to our Luma as well. It's another great place for you to hear the latest and greatest when it comes to our upcoming events, whether it's webinars or even in-person events, which is something we're planning on doing in the short-term future. Cool. I added this to the description, but I'm going to share it here in chat. This is the link to all of the files I'm going to be using today in Google Drive. You could download these. These are all CSVs, and these are the same ones I'm going to be using in today's session in case you want to follow along. No pressure if not, or if you want to, feel free to. And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to go over to my Julius demo screen, and here's all of those files. These are just sample files. They have synthetic data in them, but you can use any files that you want to use, whether it's CSVs, Excel files, JSON files, even PDFs. Not the best, but we can do it. We could extract information from PDFs too, if that's something you want to analyze in Julius. I'm going to go back to my Julius window over here, and we're going to go to notebooks. I mentioned today we were going to start from using notebooks from scratch. To do that, you could just simply click on New, and then click on Notebooks here. And this will bring you to our canvas, if you will, of a blank notebook. Before I get started there, if you don't want to start from scratch, which is another great way to get started, funny, I actually don't know where the button is anymore. There is a Explorer page for notebooks somewhere that I will share once I figure out where it is. Here, notebooks. Down here on the, click on Julius. We're always changing things here. So sometimes they move things around. I'm not sure exactly where it is. If you go to the Julius page here, there's some notebooks down below that you could use. And then we also have a page. I'll see if I could find it somewhere and share it afterwards for you to search for specific notebooks that you want to build. So if you have like net dollar retention, you could search for it here. And we have some pre-built notebooks that you guys can use to start out with. And it's another great way to get started. You just click Run Notebook, and you'll see a completed notebook for you to use, right? And that's essentially what we're going to be making today. So two main ways you can get started. First, from scratch is what we'll work through. But if you want to use something like a template, take a look at our Explore Notebooks page there. Cool. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go create a brand new notebook. And here I'm just going to select those files from our Google Drive here. I'm just going to click this one, Julius Workshop example files, and I'm going to hold Shift and click all of those together. These files are for an example dropshipping store, for example. So if you have transactions, you have customer information, you have demographic information about your customers, and then also product information. That's what we're going to be analyzing today. And I did that all using our first type of cell that you'll learn about, which is our source cell. This has all the different ways that you could add in different data sources or different files into Julius for you to analyze inside of this notebook. Here we see those uploaded. And then here I'm going to actually pop out the side window, which is called the Data Explorer. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger here just to make use of this little section that you'll see as we keep on going. The other thing I will do is also close the sidebar here just to give us a little bit more room to work with I'm not going to be navigating around too much in today's webinar, so just Notebook and Data Explorer that we'll be using. Cool. Right when you're done adding in the files, you'll see that there are 3 different suggested next steps. That's great if you don't really know where you want to go with this analysis, or if, for example, you're just not sure what you want to do next. But in this case, I'm just going to go to this next cell down here. This is called the prompt cell. And this is, if you're familiar with Julius, this is similar to just typing in our threads feature. So if I were to go back, just like typing in here, same exact thing as a prompt cell over here, right? So this is how we're going to tell Julius what we want to do, and then Julius is going to write the code and execute the code in order to fulfill that. So here, the first thing I'll do, and if you're following along, you could just say load and preview the data. I like to do this typically, and not necessary. I think when you first upload the files in this step, Julius already has uploaded and loaded the data, but we just don't see it yet in the Data Explorer. And I actually find this part pretty helpful, right? So I'm going to tell it to load and preview the data and then have it output here. Cool. And then you see these populating on the right side. If you're non-technical like myself, whenever Julius is working in Python, it's going to create these things called data frames. Fancy table, fancy word for just a table, right? It's essentially the way that we have all of the data organized in those CSVs that I uploaded. You can see them visible here in the data frame or the table. So I have one for customer demographics, which has customer IDs, customer types, etc. I have one for marketing campaigns. Maybe we're running some ads to promote sales or to get more customers potentially. And then I have another one for sales transactions. That's another one where you see just transaction IDs, dates, and timestamps, right? Cool. Let's scroll down a little bit, and then you'll see the 4 different tables that Julius had put together from our data set. Again, you could upload multiple files if you want to, and you can also upload these files in multiple steps, for example, right? If you had, later on you found out that you have more data to work with, you could simply click on the drop down here, and you could add in the source cell to add in more files if you wanted to. And that's a good segue into saying that, hey, you could always add in cells wherever you want to when you're running or creating a notebook. You don't have to work linearly or just in one direction. If you realize that there was additional files you wanted to add, or maybe a different type of cell you wanted to add earlier, you could also do that by just hovering between or before or after the cell you want to add it. And you could add in the different types of cells here. And we'll do that a little bit today. Cool. So that's adding in and loading and previewing the data. I would say the next logical step that I usually do when working with any sort of files or doing any type of analysis is to just say, let's examine the data and identify if there are any structuring issues, formatting issues, or anything that might need to be fixed before analysis. I like to do this because even for data sets where I'm pretty confident in the structure, there still might be some issues, quote unquote, issues with the data, right? And what do I mean by that? That's anything that might confuse Julius or something that might not work well with Python, right? So for example, if you have a timestamp, maybe the customer transaction timestamp, I would really want them to all be in the same format, right? Maybe year, month, day, followed by the time. Oftentimes, sometimes this can get transformed or might get, I don't know if corrupted is the right word, but it's just not structured the same way. And that could be because of the way I exported the data. It could be the query. Maybe I used a different type of query that formatted the data differently. Maybe even the way I export it from my tooling. If I used HubSpot, for example, and then I pulled it from Salesforce, maybe they format it differently, and I'm trying to mush these together. So it's always a good idea to just have Julius take a look at the structuring first, double check to see if there's either duplicate rows, formatting issues like that, or even null values, making sure we're treating those all the same way. Not necessary all the time, if you are fairly confident in the integrity of your data, but I like to do it just as a best practice and for my own peace of mind, right? Just to know that, hey, there's nothing that's going to get in the way of the data there. Cool. And then so we see Julius had run and executed this code. And then it let us know that, hey, here's some things that we found. Sales transactions uses date. We we should standardize the transaction date. Dates parse fine when using this, for example. There are duplicate transaction ID values, for example. And maybe, let's see, some other things like rename sales transactions to that. I'll say, we'll add another cell here and we'll say, okay, let's run with the suggestions to fix the things you mentioned above. And then we'll have Julius do this. If in case you are wondering, right now I am using the model GPT-5. It's the newest model out from OpenAI. If you are a free member, you are using the default model, which does use a mix of actually GPT-5 and some other models too. And we also have other ones as well, including GPT-5 Thinking, which puts a little bit more thinking into the analysis before it runs it. And then also our standard Anthropic Sonnet 4 and Opus as well are available to you. And then the other thing, I think I got some questions last time, was what are some of the custom instructions that I'm using? And I have something like this. So when generating any visualizations, make sure to format millions like 1 million, 2 million, 3 millions, or thousands like 1K, 2K, 3K. I also like to do like when creating visualizations, avoid overlapping texts or labels or keys. That's something I'll typically put in other custom instructions too, but this is typically what I run with. You can always customize Julius as you see fit. So that's just a little sneak preview of some of the settings while Julius was running there. Okay, so it looks like Julius had ran and fixed these, some of the things it did. It did what it suggested. And then it also created 4 new documents, 4 new CSVs with the updated data as well. And you could also see these, should be able to see these here in the side panel as well too. Maybe not. It just cleaned them. But it probably updated these ones here as well. Yep, marketing head, customer head, and sales head. Awesome. So that's the initial setup of a notebook. If I'm doing just exploratory data analysis or I want to do some deep dive into the data, that's what I'll do initially. Upload the data, have Julius do an initial pass on examining if there's any issues and then fixing it, right? From there, I'm going to do a couple new things. We'll say, let's do some exploratory data analysis. Fancy word for saying, Julius, go dig a little bit deeper in the data, understand, or take a look if there's any correlations or interesting trends or insights. A little bit more analysis than what it had done initially when I first uploaded the data, having to take a look there. This is something that if you're not a data analyst like I am not, something that data analysis will do is run what they call EDA or exploratory data analysis. It's like you don't know what you don't know. So start digging around, gather some insights before you think about how you want to dive even deeper into the data. It can help point you just a little bit more in the right direction. And it works the same way for Julius too. Cool, so we see Julius had dove into some of the sales numbers. It looked at the monthly revenue trend. Looks kind of funny. I think this is because this is synthetic data. Ideas behind different categories of revenue, for example, revenue by sales channels, and even price by quantity, something that might be interesting to look at. And then here, even some highlights too. Revenue distribution shows long tail with some high ticket items, sample scatter plot, and then finally some suggestions about, hey, this is how we can go forward. Let's say I want to optimize like my sales, right? Maybe every week I need to go to my operations meeting or my sales meeting and I need to say, hey, this is where we should either run new campaigns or these are products we should focus on, or maybe there's products that we should drop if they're not popular, right? So I'll go and tell Julius, I am getting ready for my weekly operations and sales meeting. Let's dive into any ways that we can optimize sales. If there are products to focus on, products to deprioritize, and marketing strategies we can use. Really broad prompt there. You could press Command Enter, which is what I just did to run that cell, or you can click in the upper left and then run the cell there, and that'll actually run it too. Cool. Okay. Cool. So this is great. Let's turn this into an ops-ready action plan. And here you can see Julius had outlined the steps it wants to do, and it's going to do this before it moves on to actually creating any either visualizations or actually plans here. So quick read on this one, some ideas behind data context, action plans, products to prioritize, for example, so double down on top revenue categories, hero SKUs with high final amounts, products to deprioritize, etc. Right? I'd imagine this might change week over week. That's something that we could look at towards the end of this webinar, is how to schedule these and maybe updating this every week for you. That's something we'll walk through. But these are some pretty good insights that I would want to share, right? Even if I was just getting ready to do this and I wanted to share this right away, a couple ways you could do so. You could simply copy the results here if you wanted to share these in like an email or as like meeting notes potentially. You could generate an analysis report, which takes away all of the different prompts that we had wrote and also any of the code and make something that we can share a little bit more easily. Let's let this load. And the other thing you could do is just prompt Julius, like, hey, I want to share this like in Slack, or I want to share this in an email. Can you format it in a way that is compelling and that is going to look or drive that conversation, right? So that's other ways that we've seen folks do this previously in the past. So we'll give this a try here and show you what an analysis report looks like. And there we go. See, here you can see we took away all of the code and all of the different prompts that I had wrote and just kept the insights and visualizations as well. Awesome. I'm going to double check that I'm actually, I saw I was on my personal subscription. I'm just going to double check that I'm here. Cool. Awesome. Let's say, let's forecast what sales would look like if we ran with your suggestions. Create any visualizations that could convey this to my team, both a mix of sales and operations and marketers. Let's see what this does. All right. All right, we'll take a look here. Pretty cool. A lot of the stuff you do around like persona crafting, what I call, so telling Julius like, hey, this is about my audience or this is the work that I'm doing is always helpful, right? It can gather some of that from your conversation, depending on how many clues and tips and little hints you give Julius. But it's always sometimes good to just say it outright, like my audience is like my team. Maybe it's like my coworkers, folks on like the operations, sales, or marketing team, right? Or maybe this is for leadership. Maybe I'm updating a board deck. It will slightly update the way it's going to approach solving your prompt. So that's always good information to give it, just like any other LLM as well. Cool. So there we go. We see some visualizations created. Baseline versus forecast. This is a funny looking one. I think it's just because the data set is so small. One thing I would clarify with it is like, hey, for the forecast, don't do 1 month. Show like week over week potential forecast. Looks like it just did another forecast uplift by just that 1 month. Let's actually update it here. I'm going to say, let's do a weekly forecast. Do a forecast for the next, we'll say like 6 weeks. Let's do a weekly forecast actually. Here I am just updating the actual prompt that I had just ran. And I'm just going to rerun the cell here and then click run. A couple reasons why that might have happened, in case you're curious. I think it's because this data set isn't like up to date, like the most recent date isn't today's date. So maybe it gets confused there about like, hey, what are we forecasting into, you know, like next month where I have no data even from this month, or it's just one of the things that comes with using a synthetic data set that isn't up to date. But I would give it a try with any live data that you have. Something that we do internally is forecasting with our own live data. Makes it a little bit easier and won't run into issues like that. But I think it's just one of the byproducts of using a synthetic data set like this one. I've seen it also similarly if I was like, hey, tell me what sales were like last month. Well, actually, there is no data for last month because this data set's from maybe like 3 months ago when I initially created it. So there we go, a little bit different as well. So here, it's a funny looking chart. I think this is because this is a synthetic data set of what this looks like. 1025. I'm just not sure. Maybe this is actually what it looked like. I'm not sure. Again, one of those things that might come from using synthetic data. But you could do any sort of forecasting as well. But this is one example of what it might look like with synthetic data. Cool. Let's just run with this for now. And then we'll do one last thing, which is let's package this all up together into a one-page summary I can share with the broader team as a newsletter. And we'll see how this goes. Cool. So here Julius is kind of outlining, and this is something that I've seen a lot with GPT-5, is it writes out a thing that what it's going to do, and then it just double checks, and I'm just going to say, yeah, let's just go with the PDF. Please. I love saying please. I think it's helpful. That's one thing that you can do. One thing we're trying out is seeing if we could update like the custom instructions to potentially say like, hey, whenever you have a plan and you're like 95% of the way there, don't ask for confirmation, just do it. Something that we have to try out still internally. I think it's one of the things that comes with GPT-5 though, that we've seen from behavior. Cool, so it's gonna generate that. But yeah, we use this internally, and that's something that we'll segue into after this runs, is maybe this is something that I wanna update every single week or maybe once a day, right? How do we actually do that without needing to run all the steps ourselves or monitor, what's going on? Is there a way for Julius to do this automatically and to me just take the outputs and just share it, right? I think that's something that a lot of folks ask us too. Let's see what this does. It's creating the visualization here and writing the code. And to continue that train of thought, that's something that we do internally, right? We have our own meetings here. We analyze the data. We use our own data connectors to update the data. And we use notebooks in order to run these periodically without needing to create the charts all over from scratch or even prompt Julius again ourselves, right? It's something that can happen asynchronously too. And we'll talk through how that does once this is done running. Cool. And it shared with us this one-page PDF. We'll take a look here, see if this opens. Is this open in this tab? Nice. And you can see a one-pager, priorities and action plan, August 26th. Yeah, I like that. That's actually pretty nice. Formatting looks a little off, something that we could clarify with Julius, like, hey, don't do double bullet points. But yeah, this is something that I would share if it was something like, hey, weekly meeting, this is what we're going to talk about, potentially. Cool. So this is all, start to finish, how to make a notebook, right? Moving into like, how do you repeat this, right? How do you get the most value out of notebooks? Well, a lot of the value actually comes from being able to repeat the analysis or, run multiple runs, what we call of notebooks. So let's walk through that a little bit together. Up here at the very top is the name of this notebook, right? We have notebooks here. If you click this, it'll go back to the notebooks page. If you click on this guy, this will open up the notebook details. Maybe I'll put in product analysis for sales meeting. And you can think of this notebook as a template. So any future runs that we do are all going to use all of these prompts that I put together, any of the code that we put together, and it's going to use that in future runs, right? So if I go to our notebooks page here and I expand our product analysis for weekly sales meeting, you could either click on this play button here, or you can click on create run. And that's going to make a brand new run, again, of that same exact notebook, minus the results and minus any of the files that we had uploaded. This way, I could simply just click on Add from Drive, add back in the files or the updated files, right? If this is a weekly meeting, maybe the files are updated every week. You could add those in. And then now we could proceed on rerunning the cells again and basically creating the outputs that we were looking for. So all those visualizations, those insights, and any one pager at the very, very end, right? That's one way that you could do it. The other way is to not use CSVs and to actually use something like your data connectors, something that we talked about in the last webinar. You can connect to any of these data sources. I would say probably lean on the Google Ads one, any of the MCPs, as well as the ones that connect to data warehouses like BigQuery, Postgres, Supabase, or Snowflake. This helps in a couple of ways. First, we'll get you a live data source, right? So if you automatically update like a table somewhere that has your sales information or transactions information, that'll get updated live. You could connect that to Julius and pull that into the notebook for running a notebook again and again and again and again without needing to upload the files yourself, or download the CSV and upload it into Julius, right? Huge unblocker for when we talk about scheduling, right? If you want to schedule a notebook to be ran at midnight, last thing that you would want to do is be up at 11:59 downloading the files and uploading into Julius to set it up, right? That's where these data connectors are really, really handy, and where we do use these internally as well. We use Snowflake, BigQuery, and we also use Postgres too. So we connect directly to those. We have these notebooks all set up. It'll run, create the outputs for us. I wake up in the morning with my cup of coffee before my weekly meeting, and I just take those insights and throw them into my Notion doc. So it takes care of at least those first 1 through 5 steps. Updating the Notion doc is where I carry it over the finish line. And something that we'll talk about in future webinars is even that is going to go out of business soon. With the Zapier connector or even the Notion connector, you can just take the outputs and just update a doc automatically. Something that we'll walk through. So let's imagine that. Let's imagine that you did update the notebook to have the data connectors in there. Let's say, for example, I did have like my Postgres or Supabase, or maybe I even connected it to my Google Ads connector. At that point, you don't need to update any of these files. You could simply just schedule the notebook and then have it run automatically. And we'll actually talk through that right now. To schedule a notebook, you have to go back to the template, that initial notebook that we had created. And you'll see this little clock icon up in the upper right-hand corner. Here you can click this and you can click on Enable Schedule. And here you could specify maybe the schedule name, your time zone, so we know when exactly you are expecting this to be done by or ran at. Here I'm going to put this as weekly. And then you could put in the exact time that you want this report done by. So here I'll just do like 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If it is weekly, you could also specify which day of the week you want this done. Maybe my weekly sync is on every Tuesday. And then you could even click on Test Now, and that'll show you an example of what it's going to look like maybe at 8 or at 1:45 every Tuesday, so you don't actually have to monitor it. Here you can see it ran into an issue. Again, this is because I have no files connected, so it really just doesn't know what to do. Again, scheduling will work a lot better when you have data connectors hooked up. And again, it's a really straightforward process to doing this, especially if you have your own Postgres or Supabase. BigQuery, a little bit more involved, and same with Snowflake as well. If you have an IT team, they'll be able to help. We also have our documentation for all of these different connectors here, which outlines, hey, this is the data that you'll need or the information that you need to add your own BigQuery and then pull those results into Julius automatically. But once this is done running over here, sorry, where am I at? Over here. Once this notebook is done running, it's going to send you an email saying, hey, your run of product analysis for weekly meeting every Tuesday is done, and here's the results, and it'll take you to this page here where you could download the results and share it wherever you need to. A few other callouts before I move on from this step is the scheduled notebook will run every single cell multiple times until it's done running. Oftentimes, or sometimes, Julius will run into errors, even when especially when it's generating code for the first time or regenerating code, right? It'll try to regenerate the code, and sometimes it might run into issues, right? And might get stuck. We built in some logic to, hey, just rerun the cells until it's done. So it'll rerun the cells 3 times until it gets to the very end of the notebook. If it's successful, again, it'll send you an email. If it ran into an issue and it just wasn't able to complete itself, it'll also send you an email as well. I'll caveat and say that, hey, it's probably best to schedule notebooks that you've been able to at least sit through and run through yourself without any errors before setting Julius to do it automatically. Probably best to schedule notebooks that are pretty well polished first, but give it a try. I think there's pretty, we're always eager to hear from folks how they're using scheduled notebooks. This is a really high demanded feature, especially because, notebooks, once you have them like 99% of the way there, all you want to do really is just rerun them. You don't want to make them again from scratch. So give it a try and let us know how things go. And then the last thing I'll talk about a little bit more is repeatability. How do you get it so Julius isn't regenerating the code from scratch, right? If you're updating a slide deck every Wednesday for your meeting or you're updating notes, you kind of want everything to be in a consistent and reliable format, right? Usually, I mean, it depends how you're what you're looking for. I think internally, I like my charts to look fairly similar week over week. It just helps with like carrying over the narrative from what we were talking about last week and keeping it consistent with future weeks. But nothing wrong with having it regenerate from scratch. It can get close, but it's not going to be exactly the same. Well, how do you actually get it to be exactly the same, right? How do you get more consistent results? When you're making your notebook for the first time, after you're done running a cell and after Julius has either created the code and then ran it and created an output, you can click on this stamp icon in the upper right-hand corner of the prompt cell. What this will do is actually going to separate out the prompt from the code and the outputs, or sorry, the code that generates the outputs, right? So here was the old cell, load and preview the data. Here, Julius had generated all this code from scratch. Maybe I don't want it to generate the code from scratch. It's a pretty simple step, which is just loading and previewing those 4 files that I uploaded. So by clicking that button, it's going to separate it into a markdown cell here that just says load and preview the data, just to keep context about what the code does. And then the 2 different code blocks that Julius had ended up writing in order to load and preview the data here. You can click on accept 3 changes, and that's what it's going to put into our notebook. So this does 2 things, right? First, it separates out the prompt cell into a markdown cell, so we're not going to ask Julius to regenerate code. And the other thing he does is it just keeps that same code that we had written before without needing to rewrite it. This result, in theory, and not in theory, it will be exactly the same as when we had just done it in the first time we ran the notebook. So there you go. It's generating this, and then it's just going to update this one into those files that we had done previously. Right. It's pretty useful, especially for visualizations, I would say. So if you're expecting the same format of bar chart or column chart with the same colors, the same fonts and everything, you could add that, and then you could use that button in order to just lock that code in place and then reprocess any data that you have in future runs or future meetings. It'll just be updated data in the same format of those visualizations you've had before, right? Let's do one down below. So down here, I have this one. I'm going to separate out the code to generate those visualizations there. So I'll click on turn into repeatable analysis, accept the changes. And now if you just click on the code and you run the code, it'll print out that same exact visualization that we had done before. It should. I think we ran into some issues before. I think that's what's causing this is if, for example, the file names change is one reason why things might go wrong with this step. So that's one thing to watch out for. If your files change names at any point, I think in this case, these file names of marketing campaigns updated isn't actually what I wanted to use. We wanted to use the original file names, which are up here. I think we ran into some issues. Just keep the file names consistent when you're using the turn into repeatable steps. That way, Julius isn't going to refer to some different file that it doesn't have access to. I think that's essentially what just happened here. But yeah, you could essentially just take that turn into repeatable steps button, run it, and then it's going to use that for all future runs. And that really does help solidify and make those steps really, really concrete, something to look out for. Give it a try. Let us know if you have any issues. But again, one thing, I think we ran into that here, just keep your file names consistent. If you are uploading new CSVs from scratch, it does help to have this be named exactly the same way. The alternative way that you could also work around that consistent file name thing is just create a prompt cell and say, let's call the files X, Y, or Z. And you can name it that way and then use this in the code cells down below. Couple ways that you could work around keeping the file names consistent, even when the data itself might be changing. So there's some ways that you can get more consistent results, and we've seen that really does help. And the other thing that you could also do is up in the upper right-hand corner, go to the chat settings, customize Julius, and put in any other business context or ways that you want Julius to be more consistent in the future, right? So things like make sure you use this formula for NRR, you use this formula for calculating, sales over time or something like that. And the other thing you could also do is update the chart themes too, and this will keep this consistent throughout your entire notebook as well. And here's where you could put in a lot of those specific features, like, specific fonts you want. Use font like Comic Sans, for example, if you want Comic Sans. I love Comic Sans. Or you could put in things like, any other ways that you want to customize the chart, and it'll keep that throughout to help with the consistency as well. Cool. I know this is quite a lot of information, but give it a try. This is essentially the way you can get started using notebooks. When you're done creating a notebook, you could also share it. That's another good value prop of notebooks. You could add in your teammates here and they could work with you live inside of a notebook. You could create a public notebook if you want to share this in Slack, for example. Maybe you don't have folks already on the team. And everyone could come and look at either this notebook in particular and all the different runs and outputs of this notebook. Or they could even make updates or adjust or changes to it if you added them here and you give them editing access as well. And then finally, the last thing is you could also create this publish on the Explore page. And this will take us to the notebooks page there, and it'll add it as like a template for everyone else to use. So if you have something that you really like to use and you want to show it off a little bit, maybe you posted it on your social media and you want folks to take a look at it, that's a great way for you also to get some exposure there too. Awesome. That's it for today's session. I'll point you to some other resources as well. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but our documentation is a great place for you to just read about first notebooks we have here, some of the videos that we have, and then also some of the other features that we're working on currently. You could read all about it in our notebooks, in our documentation. The other place you can get help at is our community Slack, right? You could sign up here, something that we spun up earlier last month, but you can have folks join several channels here for you to reach out, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on, but also if you have any questions too, it's a great place to get answers from other Julius users around the world too. And then finally, we have our support. So you can click on support here, and this will let you email our team, which is team@julius.ai. Any questions about billing or account issues or any other general inquiries, you could add there as well, and we'll get back to you too. Any last questions before we hop off? Anything that I could answer for folks? Any thoughts, comments, concerns? Cool. If not, then I'll wait a few more minutes for folks to have questions. I'll turn the music back on just a little bit here. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Spanish-speaking webinars coming up on Thursday for onboarding. We're really excited for that one. That's our first Spanish-speaking one. It's not going to be hosted by me. It's going to be hosted by my good friend and colleague Simon, who's going to help out with that one. And then we also have another onboarding webinar coming up next Tuesday as well. Talk through all the really basics to getting started using Julius, etc. too. And then, yeah, I'll send out a quick feedback survey at the end of this webinar. Please let us know if you have any questions or any feedback for what can make these sessions more useful for you. Maybe there's other topics you want us to dive into, maybe a specific data set that you want us to work with. We've been using this product data set for the last 2 or 3 webinars, but always happy to adjust the sample data that we use to walk through how to get started using a notebook as well. Other things I'll call out while we have a few more minutes. We just released our Google Ads connector. If you haven't seen that, feel free to go to our LinkedIn page, also our Twitter. If you do any sort of marketing, if you have ads campaigns running on Google Ads or even on Meta Ads, which we have coming soon, really, really cool on how to get it in Julius, right? You could simply connect it, get all of your campaign data, your cost data, and then even keyword research and see like ways that you could optimize it. Not only can you analyze it all within Julius, but you could actually let Julius update your campaigns for you. Some experiment that we're also running internally is having Julius make adjustments to our campaigns. Really cool stuff. So I would definitely give it a try if you guys are running Meta Ads or Google Ads too. Meta Ads coming soon, sorry. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. And we'll see you guys in the Spanish webinar on Thursday, or see you next Tuesday for the next webinar as well. Take care. See ya, and we'll see you in the next one.